Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello guys, we are from group 10 and on this occasion we will discuss about race and ethnicity. First of all, let me introduce our group members. We are myself, Dina Trisnawati with ID number is 1932 and 2, and then Nurlina with ID number is 1932 and 8, and Denisa Reshi Prestia with ID number is 1932 0070 and 4, and the last is Muhammad Hafid At-Tariq with the ID number is 1932 019 and 8. Okay, so what are we going to cover here? The first is the definition of race and ethnicity. The second is race and ethnicity, of course, includes in Indonesia, in America, in England, and in Australia. Next is about racial discrimination in Indonesia, in England, in America, and in Australia. Okay, the first is the definition. We start with the definition of race. Bruce J. Cohn said that race is a grouping of humans based on the physical or biological characteristics of individuals in them that are the same and are passed down from generation to generation. And another opinion came from Alex and Theo, who said that race is the classification of a group of humans by the surrounding community based on the biological characteristic they have. Certain races have different biological characteristics from the people around them. So it can be concluded that race is a group of people based on similarities in biological characteristics that can be passed on to their offspring. So that between one race with another race in a country must be different. Next is, what is ethnicity? Ethnicity is a social unit that can be distinguished from other social units based on an awareness of the identity of cultural differences, especially language. Based on the book Suku Bangsa Dunia dan Kebudayaannya by Pram, ethnic groups are defined as a human group whose members identify with each other. Ethnic identity is also characterized by recognition from others of the characteristic of the group and by similarities in culture, language, religion, behavior, or biological characteristics. Race and ethnicity are two different things. Now look at the table here to compare race and ethnicity. First, race is considered to be a biological classification, while ethnicity is to be a cultural identity. Next is, if the race is determined by the physical appearance but the ethnicity is by the manner of dressing, then members of one race cannot join another race, but in ethnicity we can join to another ethnicity. Well, now we will move on to the second topic, which is about race and ethnicity. The first thing we discuss is race and ethnicity in Indonesia. What are the races in Indonesia? There are Proto-Malay, Deutero-Malay, Melanesian Papuan, Vedoid, Mongoloid, and Caucasoid. Okay, let's go discuss one by one. For the first is Proto-Malay or Old Malay race. This race has characteristics such as brown skin, round face, curly or straight hair, a medium or wide nose, and tall slender body. Usually people belonging to this race have animism and dynamism. Proto-Malay Indonesia includes the Toraja tribe in South Sulawesi, Batak tribe, Nias tribe, Sasak tribe, Dayak tribe, Kubut tribe in North Sumatra. And the second is Deutero-Malay race. The characteristic of this race are the same as the Proto-Malay race, but this race no longer adheres to animism and dynamism. Included in this race are the Javanese, who spread on the island of Java, the Maduris, the Banjar, the Minangkabau, the Bugis, and the Acehnese. And then the Melanesian Papuan race. The characteristics of this race are black skin, stocky body, curly hair, thick lips, and sharp nose. This race includes the Tapiro tribe in Papua Island and Aru Islands. And then the Fedoid race, the characteristics are brown skin, small stature, and wavy hair. Included in this race are the Tomuna tribe in Muna Island, Tuala tribe, Gayo tribe in around the Lake Toba, Saka tribe in Siak, Tomuna tribe in Mentawa Islands, and the Kubu tribe in Jambi. As we know that Indonesia is not a country that is only occupied by local people, but there is also a group of people from Indonesia. Therefore, in Indonesia, there are races such as the Mongoloid and the Caucasoid. For the Mongoloid or Asiatic Mongoloid race, such as Japan, China, and Korea, and for the Caucasoid race, such as Pakistan, Arab, and Indian. Indonesia has so many ethnic groups that it is impossible for us to mention all of them. So here we have the 2010 census data on the ethnic groups with the highest number of followers in Indonesia. It can be seen in this diagram that the ethnic groups with the highest number of followers are Javanese, Sundanese, Malay, Batak, Maduris, Betawi, Minangkabau, Buginese, Bantenese, Banjaris, Balenese, Acehnese, Dayak, Sasak, and others. Indonesia has more than 700 languages spoken in Indonesia, but the most widely spoken are Indonesian, English, Dutch, and the languages of each region. And then there are several religions in Indonesia, such as Muslim or Islam, Protestant, Catholic, Hindu, Buddhist, and Confucianism.
Race and ethnic in America. The first United States Census in 1790 classed residents as free white people, all other free persons, and enslaved people. The 2000 census officially recognized 6 racial categories, including people of 2 or more races. A category called some other race was also used in the census and other surveys, but is not official. In the 2000 census and subsequent Census Bureau surveys, Americans have described as belonging to this racial group: White American, European American, and Middle Eastern American, thus having origins in any of the original people of Europe, the Middle East, or North Africa. Following consultation with Middle East and North America organization, the Census Bureau announced in 2014 that it would establish a new MENA ethnic category for population from the Middle East, North America, and the Arab world. However, this did not occur on the 2020 census. Black or African American, those having origins in any of the native people of sub-Saharan Africa. For the 2000 census, this includes people who indicated their race or races as Black African American or Negro, or wrote in entries such as African American, Afro American, Nigerian, or Haitian, American Indian or Alaska Native, thus having origins in any of the original peoples of North, Central, and South America, Asian American, thus having origins in any of the original peoples who of the Far East, Southeast Asia, and the Indian subcontinent. Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander, those having origins in any of the original peoples of Polynesia, Melanesia, or Micronesia. Other respondents wrote how they identified themselves if different from preceding categories. However, 95% of the people who report in this category are Hispanic mestizos. This is not a standard OMB race category. Responses have included mixed race terms such as métis, Creole, and mulatto, which are generally considered to be categories of multiracial ancestry, but write-in entries reported in the 2000 census also included nationalities such as South Africa, Belizean, or Puerto Rican, as well as other terms for mixed race group like Wishort, Malanjan, mixed interracial, and other. Two or more races, widely known as multiracial, those who check off and or write in more than one race. There is no option labeled two or more races or multiracial on census and other forms. People who report more than one of the foregoing six options are classified as people of two or more races. In subsequent processing, any respondent may identify with any number, including all six of the racial categories. Each person has two identifying attributes, racial identity, and whether or not they are Hispanic ethnicity. These categories are sociopolitical constructs and should not be interpreted as being scientific or anthropological in nature. They have been changed from one census to another, and the racial categories include both racial and national origin groups. In 2007, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission of the U.S. Department of Labor finalized the update of its EEO-1 report format and guidelines concerning the definition of racial or ethnic categories.
Hello, my name is Denisa Resi Prestia with student ID number 193200N74. I will explain about ethnicity and races in England, discrimination, ethnic and races in England, and last, discrimination, ethnic and races in America. In history, a variety of ethnic groups have settled on the British Isles dating back from the last ice age until the 11th century. These populations included the Celts, Picts, Romans, Anglo-Saxons, Norse, and the Normans. Recent genetic studies have suggested that the prehistoric Bell Beaker influx and the Anglo-Saxon migrations have had particularly significant effects on the genetic makeup of modern Britons. King William the Conqueror introduced the first Jewish settlers in England in 1070, and later on in the 16th century was when the first Romanists were introduced in Britain. The UK has a history of small-scale non-European immigration, with Liverpool having the oldest Black British community dating back to at least the 1730s, during the period of the African slave trade. The oldest Chinese community in Europe dates back to the arrival of Chinese seamen in the 19th century. In the 19th century, there was an increase of Jewish and Irish people living in Great Britain, where the ethnic dialects contributed to the formation of the Cockney dialect. The majority of The usual resident population, 48.2 million people or 86.0% of the population, reported their ethnic group as white in the 2011 census. Within this ethnic group, white British was the largest with 80.5%, followed by any other white with 4.4%. Indian was the next largest ethnic group with 2.5%, followed by Pakistani in 2.0%. This is consistent with census findings on international migration, which found that South Asian countries such as India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh continued to rank highly within the most common non-UK countries of birth. The remaining ethnic groups each accounted for up to 2% of the population in 2011. There were two new tick boxes in the 2011 census: Gypsy or Irish traveler and Arab. Arab accounted for 0.4% of the population. Gypsy or Irish traveler accounted for 0.1% of the population, making it the smallest ethnic category in 2011. National minorities. The British government recognizes the Scottish, Welsh, Irish, and Cornish peoples as national minorities under the Council of Europe's Framework Convention for the Protection of National Minorities, which the UK signed in 1995 and ratified in 1998. A proposal for longitudinal study of ethnic minorities creates designated ethnic groups under Indian, Pakistani, Bangladeshi, Caribbean, and Black African.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Nurlina. My student ID number is 19320008. And here I'm gonna talk about race and ethnicity in Australia. According to Elkin, the races in the world are divided into three major groups, namely the Caucasoid, Mongoloid, and Negroid races. The descendants of original inhabitants of Australian are called Australoid, or descendants of Melanesians are commonly known as Aborigines. In the book The Official Bicentennial Diary, which is a book published by Australian historians in commemoration of Australia 200th anniversary, it is stated that they had arrived in at least two waves, but probably more, at least 40,000 years ago, maybe even 70,000 years ago. Physical characteristics: indigenous Australians have brown skin, wavy curly hair, face and body covered with fine hair, narrow forehead, has deep eye sockets, wide mouth, and thick skull bones. Elkin and Needham in Siboro argue that indigenous Australians have physical similarities to the Sakat people of Malaysia, the indigenous Papuans, and the Vedas of Sri Lanka. Full-blood Aborigines living on the arid and tropical frontiers, widely considered members of a doomed race, were segregated on missions and excluded from national census according to Section 127 of the new Constitution. Meanwhile, those of less than a quarter Aboriginal blood were counted as white, reflecting the widespread assumption that the so-called half-caste Aboriginal population would gradually merge both culturally and biologically into sheltered colonial society. And next, about ethnicity in Australia, you can see here, guys, you can read about Australia demographic profile. There are ethnic groups in the picture, pie chart, and data about languages and religions. You can read here, guys. And next, about discrimination. First, racial discrimination in Indonesia. Cases of discrimination still often occur in Indonesia. In America, there is very often discrimination against black people, black skin, and also in Indonesia. Cases of discrimination that occur in Indonesia are generally about religion, people with disabilities, and racial discrimination. In this discrimination often happens to the Papuan people, and these are some of the racial discriminations that have occurred in Indonesia. The case of students from Papua who were discriminated against in Surabaya on August 16, 2019, and cases of violence and arrest in action of the Papuan Student Alliance AMP Aliansi Mahasiswa Papua on March 5, 2021.
In discrimination, ethnic and racist in England, there are a case from murder of Stephen Lawrence. Stephen Lawrence was a black British teenager from Plumstead, southeast London, who was murdered in a racially motivated attack while waiting for a bus in Wellhall Road in Eltham on the evening of 22 April 1993. After the initial investigation, 2 suspects were arrested but not charged. A 1998 public inquiry examined the original Metropolitan Police Service investigation and concluded that the investigation was incompetent. In 2010, the case was said to be one of the highest profile unsolved racially motivated murders. On 18 May 2011, it was announced that 2 of the original suspects, Gary Dobson and David Norris, were to stand trial for the murder in the light of new evidence. On the 3rd January 2012, Dobson and Norris were found guilty of Lawrence's murder. The pair were juveniles at the time of the crime and were sentenced to detention equivalent to a life sentence for an adult. In the years after Dobson and Norris were sentenced, the case regained prominence from when the concerns of corrupt police conduct during the original case handling surfaced in the media. Such claims had surfaced before and been investigated in 2006 but were reignited in 2013 when a former undercover police officer stated in an interview that at the time he had been pressured to find ways to smear and discredit the victim's family in order to mute and deter public campaigning for better police responses to the case.
Discrimination in Australia. In 2014, nearly 2,000% of Australians experienced discrimination because of their skin color, ethnic origin, or religion. Self-reported discrimination is on an upward trend. Since white people arrived in Australia, it has always been difficult for them to understand Aboriginal culture. Ignorance led to many thousand Aboriginal people being killed by white settlers, and attempts were made to breed out their culture through assimilation. Aboriginal people continue to feel misunderstood by white Australian politics. They claim that many legislative acts reflect a white point of view, where at least a dual view would be necessary. Some activists even speak of genocide still going on in Australia today. A 2011 survey of academic staff in higher education revealed that more than 70% of Aboriginal academics and professional staff had experienced discrimination and racist attitudes in their workplace. The academics especially described discrimination, tokenism, and paternalism. Only 18.6% of employers that taken positive action to address discrimination and racism. Almost 10% of surveyed Australians said they would engage in discriminatory behavior against Aboriginal Australians in certain circumstances, and 30% said they had witnessed such behavior. Anti-discrimination laws have failed to result in any successful prosecution since they were introduced in 1989, despite more than 27 public complaints about alleged breach. Assimilation politics of the 1970s seems to have left a legacy in the Australian conscience. More than half of surveyed Australians support that the idea that people from racial, ethnic, cultural, and religious minority groups should behave more like mainstream Australians. Only a third disagreed with this idea.